I don't usually talk about this, but every Thanksgiving, it comes back to me. This happened a couple of years ago, and it still gives me chills when I think about it. I had just moved to a new city for work and couldn't make it home for Thanksgiving that year. My family was a 6-hour drive away, and I figured it was too much to deal with for just a day or two off. So I stayed behind and planned to have a quiet dinner by myself. That morning, I went to the grocery store to pick up a few things. It was busy, as you'd expect, with people rushing to grab last-minute items. I remember standing in line, scrolling through my phone when I noticed someone staring at me. It was a man, probably in his late 30s. He had this unkempt look, like he hadn't slept in days. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but every time I glanced up, there he was, just watching me. It wasn't a casual look either. His eyes were locked on me, and it made me really uncomfortable. When I finally checked out and headed to my car, I felt a weird sense of relief. But as I loaded my bags into the trunk, I caught a glimpse of him again. He was leaning against a car a few rows over, still staring. I told myself I was just being paranoid. Maybe he wasn't even looking at me. Maybe he was just zoning out or something. I got in my car and drove home, shaking off the feeling as best as I could. The rest of the day was normal, quiet actually. I cooked a small meal, watched some Thanksgiving specials, and tried to enjoy the peace. It wasn't until it got dark that I started feeling uneasy again. I live in a small apartment on the ground floor, and my living room has these big windows that look out onto the street. I had the curtains open, letting in the glow of the streetlights. While I was finishing my dinner, I thought I saw movement outside. At first, I ignored it. It's a busy neighborhood. People walk their dogs and cars drive by. But when I looked up, I saw someone standing on the sidewalk, right across from my window. It was the same man from the grocery store. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there, staring at my window. My stomach dropped. I froze, unsure of what to do. Should I call someone? Maybe the police. But what would I even say? I told myself to stay calm. Maybe he lived in the neighborhood, and it was just a coincidence. So I closed the curtains and tried to focus on something else. Not even 5 minutes later, there was a knock at my door. My heart started racing. Nobody was supposed to come over. I wasn't expecting anyone. Slowly, I crept to the door and looked through the peephole. It was him. He just stood there, his hands in his pockets, rocking slightly on his feet. He didn't say anything or knock again, just stood there, waiting. I backed away from the door, trying to figure out what to do. My phone was on the coffee table, so I grabbed it and dialed 911. I whispered to the dispatcher what was happening, trying not to make any noise. The dispatcher told me to stay on the line and lock all my doors and windows. That's when I realized something terrifying. I hadn't locked the back door. I crept toward the kitchen, heart pounding. And just as I reached the back door, I heard it. The handle jiggled. He was trying to get in. I slammed the lock into place and backed away, shaking. A few seconds later, there was loud banging on the back door, like he was trying to break it down. The dispatcher assured me that officers were on their way. I stayed on the phone, hiding in the corner of my living room, clutching a kitchen knife in my hand just in case. Then everything went quiet. No banging, no footsteps, nothing. When the police arrived, they searched the area but didn't find anyone. The man was gone, and there was no sign of him anywhere. I didn't sleep that night. I kept every light on and jumped at every little sound. For weeks, I felt like I was being watched, even though I never saw him again. Now, every Thanksgiving, I double-check my locks. I keep my curtains closed. And I can't help but wonder, what would have happened if I hadn't locked that back door in time? I moved out of my parents' house right when I turned 18, Nothing against them. I just wanted to live by myself and live in the city. I got myself a small studio apartment in Chicago. I had to work both the day before and the day after Thanksgiving that year, so I wasn't able to go home. Instead, I had a lonely day at home in my own apartment. I'd never cooked a Thanksgiving dinner before, and really didn't think that I needed that much food, so I just got myself a big TV dinner. I really hadn't realized how lonely I would actually be, though. In fact, the loneliness was so overwhelming that I also began getting cabin fever. I think in actuality, I just wanted to be around other people. So after I had eaten my TV dinner, I went out and went for a walk. It was cold outside, and there weren't a whole lot of people out. Since I had moved to the city, it was the first time I had not seen literally swarms of people everywhere. I walked around on the street by the bars but knew I wouldn't be able to get into any of them. I was out for quite a while before I decided I just wanted to go back to my apartment and be warm. So I headed back. When I got to my apartment, I put the key in the lock. I opened the door and went in. My apartment was a studio, and the only other room it had in it was a bathroom. Having walked around the city for a couple of hours and not having gone into any buildings, I really had to go to the bathroom. I always kept the bathroom door closed. I went in and didn't turn on the light. I just used the light from the rest of the house. When I was peeing, I got the strangest feeling. I felt very uncomfortable, and like someone may have been watching me. My bathroom, strangely enough, had a window in it. It was actually on the wall of the shower. So I turned to look out the window and expected to see a bird or something. Instead, I came eye to eye with the form of a person behind the translucent shower curtain. It was a person, and he was looking directly at me. Startled, I fell backward. He opened the shower curtain. I scurried backward out of the bathroom. I made it to my feet and went for the door. However, before I got out, I felt the man grab me from behind. I struggled, but all he did was take me and throw me across the room. He then left the apartment and the door slammed behind him. I got up as quickly as I could and locked the door. I then phoned the police. It didn't do any good, really. I noticed several items from my apartment were missing. Apparently the guy was a burglar and didn't expect me to come back. I just caught him in the act, and he likely wasn't intent on harming me specifically. Thanksgiving is supposed to be about family, but that year, I spent it on the road. My parents live 4 hours away, and because of work, I couldn't leave until late afternoon. I knew I'd be driving into the evening, but I figured I'd make it in time for dessert. The first half of the drive was just me, my playlist, and the open road. I pulled into a small station off the highway when I realized I was running low on gas. It was one of those old, run-down places with a flickering neon sign and a single pump. I didn't see anyone around, but the pump was working, so I figured I'd fill up quickly and get back on the road. As I stood there, shivering in the cold, I got that weird feeling. You know, the one where you feel like someone's watching you. I glanced around but didn't see anyone. The parking lot was empty except for an old truck parked on the side, its windows dark. I told myself I was being paranoid. Just as the pump clicked to let me know it was done, I heard a voice. Heading somewhere special for the holiday? I nearly jumped out of my skin. The voice came from behind me, and when I turned, there was a man standing there. I hadn't heard him walk up, and I couldn't figure out where he'd come from. He was tall, wearing a dirty jacket, and his face was partially hidden by the shadow of his hood. Yeah, I said, trying to sound casual. Just visiting family. He smiled, but it didn't feel friendly. Must be nice. Family's important. I nodded, wanting to end the conversation. Yep, it is. As I moved to put the pump back, he stepped closer. You traveling alone? Something about how he asked made my instinct not to tell him the truth. No, I lied. My boyfriend's in the car. His smile faltered for a split second, and his eyes flicked toward my empty car. "Is that right?" I didn't respond. Instead, I forced a polite smile, got in my car, and locked the doors. He just stood there, watching me as I pulled away. I tried to shake it off as I got back on the highway, telling myself it was just a creepy encounter and nothing more. But about 10 minutes later, I saw headlights in my rearview mirror. At first, I didn't think much of it. It's a highway after all. But as I changed lanes, so did the car behind me. Every time I sped up, it did too. If I slowed down, it stayed right behind me. That's when I knew it was him. My hands were gripping the wheel so tightly they hurt. I didn't know what to do. I was in the middle of nowhere, no exits, no other cars, just the dark road stretching ahead of me. I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence, but then his headlights started flashing, on and off, like he was trying to get my attention. Panic set in. I couldn't stop. What if he tried to block my car, or worse? I grabbed my phone and called 911, trying to keep my voice steady as I explained what was happening. The dispatcher told me to stay on the line and keep driving until I reached the next exit, where an officer would meet me. It felt like the longest 10 minutes of my life. The car stayed right behind me the entire time, its headlights glaring in my mirror. Finally, I saw the exit sign and the flashing lights of a police car. I pulled over, and the other car sped past, veering back onto the highway. The officer took my statement and promised to look for the truck, but they didn't find him. I made it to my parents' house, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. If you're craving more spine-chilling tales, join us for more haunting mysteries and horror stories. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications.